Why was everyone laughing except her? The sound wasn't friendly. It was sharp, echoing, and self-satisfied, the kind of laughter that fed on someone else's silence. "Look, boys," the man in charge barked. "The HR department finally sent us a babysitter. Don't trip on your clipboard, sweetheart." The crowd broke again, deep, unguarded chuckles from a dozen men in black tactical uniforms. Their voices bounced off the cold concrete walls of the unfinished 47th floor, a half-built tower overlooking Manhattan. Dust hung in the air like smoke. She didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't even blink. Her name was Anya Sharma, though no one here knew what that meant, not yet. She stood still, notebook in one hand, pen in the other. Her expression unreadable, posture centered. There was something unnerving about her stillness, not stiffness, not fear, but balance. Controlled, effortless balance. Up in the observation booth, a retired admiral named James Keltwell leaned forward, watching the scene through the reinforced glass. He had seen enough soldiers in his lifetime to know when a room misunderstood what it was looking at. They thought they were staring at a bureaucrat. He knew they were staring at danger. Down below, Rick Henson, head of corporate security, puffed out his chest. A former military policeman, all muscle and noise, the kind of man who mistook volume for authority. His hair was regulation short, his jaw square, his ego enormous. For Henson, strength was a show, broad shoulders, booming voice, instant obedience. Anya offered none of that. She offered silence, and that silence made him furious. He saw her calmness as mockery, her stillness as judgment. So he decided to break her. "All right, team," he barked, clapping his hands together. "Next drill, active aggressor hostage scenario. Let's make it interesting." He pointed at her. "You're the hostage." A few men grinned. Two of them, Miller and Jones, stepped forward. Each was over 6 feet, easily 200 pounds of bulk and self-confidence. Anya said nothing. She just closed her notebook with a quiet click. The sound, small as it was, sliced through the laughter like a blade. She tucked her pen behind her ear and gave the faintest nod. No protest, no sarcasm, just calm acceptance. And for the first time, Henson felt something he didn't understand, unease. As she walked toward the center of the training floor, her steps measured, something about her changed. Not dramatically, but subtly. Her shoulders dropped a fraction, her breathing deepened. The air around her seemed to shift. Gone was the quiet observer. Standing there now was something different. Predatory, aware. Her eyes flicked over the room, exits, sightlines, potential weapons. A discarded metal pipe in the corner, a fire extinguisher. The steel-toed boots on her captor's feet, every detail catalogued, processed, stored. She inhaled once, deep, slow, then stilled again. Henson gave the signal. "Go." Miller moved first, fast, rehearsed aggression. He came up behind her, locking one massive arm across her chest, pinning her arms. Jones followed, grinning, stepping in front of her. The signal from Henson was subtle, a nod that said show her who's in charge. Jones's hand shot out and clamped around her throat. Hard. The grip was immediate and brutal. His thumb pressed against her windpipe, air cut off. Henson's voice boomed through the loudspeaker, thick with condescension. "See that, gentlemen? That's real life. 10 seconds and she's out cold, simulation over." But it wasn't over. Not even close. Because in that moment, that instant of choking pressure, Anya did the unthinkable. She went limp. Completely. Her body surrendered, no struggle, no fight, just stillness. Jones's fingers dug deeper. He expected panic, the usual wide eyes, the desperate gasps. Instead, her gaze stayed locked on his. Calm, focused, observing. 10 seconds, 15. Something about the silence made the room shift. The laughter had faded. Even Henson's smirk faltered. 30 seconds. Jones's forearm began to tremble, not from exhaustion but confusion. What the hell was happening? 45. Sweat slid down his temple. He was using every ounce of strength he had, and still she didn't react. Her eyes open, distant, patient. 60 seconds. Someone in the back whispered, "Sir." No one answered. Up in the booth, Admiral Keltwell leaned forward, eyes narrowing. He'd seen this before once, years ago, in a different kind of room underwater, during a test meant to push humans past their limits. He knew exactly what she was doing. Controlled apnea. The art of silence under pressure. The discipline of dying just enough to survive. 90 seconds. Jones's grip slackened, not because he wanted to, but because his brain screamed that something was wrong. The human body wasn't supposed to behave like that. And that's when Anya moved. One heartbeat, she was still. The next, she exploded. Her elbow snapped back into Miller's arm with surgical precision, hitting a nerve cluster so hard he cried out and dropped her. In the same fluid motion, she twisted into Jones's grip, grabbed his wrist, and rotated fast, clean, brutal. His joints screamed. His weight shifted forward, and she used it. He hit the concrete face first. It was over in less than 2 seconds. When she stood again, her breathing was calm, balanced, controlled. Around her, silence, total. She rubbed her throat once, slow, deliberate, then looked at Henson. No anger, no triumph, just clarity. The kind that doesn't need words. Henson stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. The other men looked everywhere but her face. Then from the booth, Admiral Keltwell's voice, low, steady, commanding. "Mr. Henson just said the word impossible." No one moved. "That word," Keltwell continued, "is what people use when the world no longer fits what they believe, when ignorance meets reality." He stepped into the room, older, broad-shouldered, wearing the calm authority of someone who'd seen too much to be impressed by anything. He walked past the 2 groaning men on the floor, past Henson, whose face had gone pale. He reached the control table, lifted a tablet, tapped the screen. A large display on the wall flickered to life, Anya's personnel file. Most of it was blacked out, classified. "Some of you," he said quietly, "see a consultant, a bureaucrat sent to waste your time. Let me show you what I see." He entered a code. The redacted bars vanished line by line. Name: Sharma Anya. Rank: Lieutenant Commander, United States Navy. Unit: Naval Special Warfare Development Group. The room inhaled collectively, sharply. SEAL Team 6. Keltwell's voice hardened. Decorations: Navy Cross, Silver Star with 2 oak leaf clusters, Bronze Star with V for Valor. He paused, let it sink in. Then he zoomed into one line of the medical record. Static apnea under combat stress, 4 minutes 53 seconds. The silence grew heavier. "Mr. Henson's chokehold wasn't a threat," Keltwell said softly. "It was an opportunity for her to study her enemy, time her move, and end the fight when it mattered." He put the tablet down, faced her, and did something no one expected. He stood straighter, respectful. "Commander," he said aloud so everyone could hear, "my apologies. I should have introduced you properly." Then to Henson. "You made the mistake of thinking strength always shouts. You confused competence with arrogance." Henson looked down, jaw tight, words failing him. "Commander Sharma wasn't sent here to tell you how to do your job," Keltwell continued. "She was sent here to teach you how to survive when everything goes wrong." And in that moment, even the air seemed to hold still. No one dared to speak. No one dared to breathe too loud. Because they all understood something now, something no memo, no drill, no shouting sergeant could ever teach. Real strength isn't noise. It's silence that doesn't flinch. It's control that doesn't need permission. As Keltwell left the room, he stopped beside her, eyes meeting hers for a second. A silent exchange of respect between two warriors who'd both learned that survival isn't about muscle, but mind. And when she finally walked out, notebook still in hand, hair still tied tight, the men who had laughed minutes earlier didn't look at her the same way again. They didn't speak at all, only watched and wondered. How long could she hold her breath? And how many other things had she survived without anyone ever knowing? Because behind that calm face, behind those still, dark eyes, was a lifetime of storms weathered in silence. And somewhere deep down, each of them realized something they'd never forget. Sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one who's already been to hell and came back calm. She didn't hear the elevator doors close behind her. Just the soft whoosh of recycled air, and the distant hum of a city that didn't care what had just happened 47 stories above it. For a moment she stood there in the empty hallway, no audience, no orders, just breathing. Slowly, evenly. The same way she'd done underwater, years ago, in black oceans that offered no mercy and no light. Her throat ached faintly where the man's fingers had dug in. She touched it once, not in pain but in memory, then dropped her hand. She hated that it still shook, even slightly. People always thought calm meant unshakable. It didn't. It meant you shook in private. She rode the elevator down in silence, watching her reflection in the mirrored doors. No medals, no uniform, no sign of what she had once been. That was the point. Anya Sharma didn't need recognition. She'd spent years unlearning the need for it. Still, somewhere in her chest, a small voice whispered, "Why did it have to be like that again?" Every room, every test, every man who needed to see before believing. The elevator chimed, ground floor. She stepped out, walked past the security desk, nodded to the receptionist who couldn't quite meet her eyes. Word must have spread already. It always did. Outside, the city was blinding. Cars, horns, sunlight bouncing off glass. All that movement, and yet she felt like a ghost among the living. Upstairs, the men hadn't moved for nearly a minute after she left. Rick Henson stood stiff beside the training mat, jaw locked, mind blank. The laughter that had filled him minutes earlier now felt like acid. The Admiral had said survive when everything goes wrong. And that line wouldn't stop looping in his head. He'd built his whole career on control, shouting orders, enforcing fear, believing that leadership meant never being questioned. But when he saw her eyes, steady while two men twice her size failed to break her, something cracked inside him. Not fear. Something smaller, sharper. Shame. Miller and Jones sat on the edge of the mat, rubbing their necks, pretending to joke. But the jokes didn't land. Their laughter had gone hollow. That night Anya sat in her hotel room, lights off, window open to the sound of distant sirens. Her notebook lay open on the desk, not for notes, but for control. Writing kept her from remembering. Every breath, every motion in that room today had been deliberate, controlled, necessary. But what no one had seen was the flash that came before it, the memory. Hands around her throat. Water closing overhead. The roar of an engine, a mission gone wrong, a teammate's face vanishing into the dark. She wrote one line in her notebook. Control is not calm. Control is survival disguised as grace. Then closed it again. 2 days later, Admiral Keltwell summoned her. His office overlooked the Hudson, an ocean of steel and light. "Sit," he said simply. She did. He studied her face for a moment, as if measuring how much of her was still made of steel and how much had quietly rusted. "You handled yourself well," he began. She tilted her head. "Handled." He smiled faintly. "All right, you turned a security drill into a leadership seminar. Not quite what I expected when I brought you in." She stayed silent. He continued, tone softer now. "You know the video went around already." Her eyes flicked up, Of course it did. It's changing people. That team hasn't said a word since. Henson hasn't left his office. Good sign, maybe. She didn't answer. Keltwell leaned forward. They need training, the kind you can give them, not just tactics, perspective. You saw what they were. Broken by arrogance, she said quietly. He nodded. Exactly. And arrogance kills more men than bullets. You've seen that firsthand. Her gaze drifted to the window. The Hudson glimmered like liquid steel. You want me to fix them. I want you to teach them what you already know. Which is? He met her eyes. That silence isn't weakness. It's the sound discipline makes before it acts. There was a long pause. Finally she nodded once. All right. The next morning, when Rick Henson walked into the training center, he froze. She was there again, same black cargo pants, same calm presence. Only this time no notebook, just a small timer and a whiteboard. He almost turned around, but pride or maybe guilt kept him rooted. "Commander," he said stiffly. "Mr. Henson." Silence stretched, he swallowed. "I just wanted to say." She cut him off gently. "Don't say it, show it." He nodded once. The rest of the team filtered in, quieter than usual. No laughter today, just tension and curiosity. Anya clicked the timer on the table. "Rule 1, she said. You do not speak unless you can add something useful." The men exchanged looks. "Rule 2, she continued. You breathe. You don't rush, you don't react. You breathe, then you think, because panic is loud and loud gets you killed." She paced slowly, not like a teacher, more like someone taking measure of each man's center of gravity. "Rule 3, she said finally, stopping in front of Miller. Never assume size equals advantage." Miller looked down. She smiled faintly, not cruelly but knowingly. "Today," she said, "we start with silence." The men frowned. She picked up the timer, set it to 5 minutes and hit start. No talking, no moving, just breathe. Notice your body, notice what you want to do and don't do it. The seconds ticked loud in the room. Someone shifted, someone coughed, Henson's jaw clenched. Anya's voice came quiet, steady. "Feel the impulse to speak. That's the part of you that fears losing control. Learn to silence it before you silence anyone else." 5 minutes, then she stopped the timer. Miller exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. Jones looked ready to joke, but didn't. She gave a single nod. "Good, again." And they did, over and over. Hours of breathing, stillness, observation. Henson didn't understand it at first. None of them did. It felt absurd. But as the sessions went on, something subtle shifted. The room began to quiet, not in obedience but in presence. They started noticing each other, the space, the rhythm of movement. The noise inside their heads began to fade. Later that week, after another long day of drills, Henson lingered as the others left. "You ever get tired of being tested?" he asked quietly. Anya looked up from her notes. "Every day." "Then why keep doing it?" She considered him for a moment. "Because someone once told me calm is contagious, and chaos is too. I decided which one I wanted to spread." He nodded slowly. "I thought strength meant being loud enough to make people listen." "It's the opposite," she said. "It's being quiet enough that they choose to." For the first time he smiled, not forced, not defensive, just small and human. "Maybe you were the one we needed," he said. Anya didn't answer. She just looked at him, and in that silence he understood that apology didn't need words either. That night, alone again, she dreamed of the ocean. Cold, infinite, familiar. The same kind of silence she'd spent a lifetime inside. But this time, in the dream, she wasn't drowning. She was floating. She woke before dawn, heart steady, pulse slow. Opened her notebook and wrote another line. Leadership isn't telling. It's breathing long enough for others to find their air. By the end of the month, the change in the team was undeniable. Meetings shorter, orders cleaner, mistakes fewer. They listened now, they noticed. When new recruits arrived, they didn't see a pack of loud men proving themselves. They saw a team that moved like one body, quiet, coordinated, grounded. Henson still barked sometimes. Old habits die hard, but even when he did, there was a pause afterward, a moment of self-correction. He was learning. And every time she saw that, Anya felt a flicker of something she hadn't in years. Hoping. One evening, after the last session, she stood alone in the empty training room. The city lights stretched through the floor-to-ceiling windows like fireflies in glass. She closed her eyes and let the hum of electricity mix with her breath. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel it, not the calm she performed, but the exhaustion she hid behind it. All the years, all the faces, all the silence. And still, somewhere inside her, that same instinct to hold her breath until the world stopped shaking. She smiled faintly. Maybe, just maybe, this was what healing looked like. Teaching others how to breathe while you quietly relearned it yourself. Sometimes, strength isn't born in the noise of command. Sometimes it rises in the quiet between heartbeats, where pain becomes patience and patience becomes power. And in that silence, Anya Sharma, the woman they once mocked, began to teach not just how to fight, but how to be. It began on a Tuesday, the kind of morning that pretends it's ordinary. The city moved with its usual rhythm, elevators humming, phones ringing, the distant chorus of horns and sirens. Inside the corporate security floor, the team gathered for their first full-scale simulation under Commander Sharma's redesigned protocols. They didn't laugh anymore. They didn't swagger. But they were ready. Anya watched from the edge of the room, arms folded, her expression calm but eyes sharp, like a diver standing on the edge of cold water, measuring the distance before the plunge. Scenario 3, she said softly. Unknown intruder, electrical failure, limited comms. No shouting, no chaos. You work the problem, you move with purpose. You listen to your environment. Rick Henson nodded, already mapping out the plan. Understood. She gave a quiet smile. No, you feel it. Understanding is easy. Discipline is harder. He took a slow breath, the kind she had drilled into them for weeks, and nodded again, this time without words. The lights dimmed, the alarm cut in, the simulation began. Red strobes pulsed against the walls. The sound of footsteps echoed through the concrete corridors. Miller and Jones moved in synchronized silence, gestures precise, eyes scanning. No shouting, no panic, just focus. Anya observed, clipboard untouched, mind recording every motion. She'd rebuilt this team from arrogance into awareness, but awareness only mattered when tested. At minute 6, the emergency lights flickered out completely. The room went black. She heard the breath of the men, shallow, uncertain. Her voice cut through the dark. Find your bearings through sound. Your body knows the room, trust it. Someone knocked over a chair. Metal clanged. Jones cursed softly, then caught himself. Anya smiled faintly. Progress. They regrouped. The power came back. Simulation over. Better, she said quietly. But the real test isn't when things go dark. It's when you start believing they won't. Henson nodded, wiping sweat from his neck. Still rough, but it felt different. How so? Quieter, he said, like my head wasn't full of noise anymore. That's the point. Later that afternoon, as the others packed up, Henson lingered. He hesitated at the door, then said, Commander, can I ask something personal? Her eyes stayed on her notes. You can ask. That hold, the one in the first drill when he had you by the throat, how did you stay that calm? A flicker crossed her eyes, not fear, but something older. He noticed it and instantly regretted the question. She set the pen down. Because panic is a luxury, she said quietly. When you've been somewhere where air runs out for real, you stop wasting it. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. She turned away, gathering her things. "Good night, Mr. Henson." The conversation ended there, but the question stayed with both of them. That night sleep came for her like it always did, slowly, reluctantly. And when it did, it came with water. Cold. Black. Endless. She was back in the Indian Ocean. Operation Larkspur, a covert boarding mission gone wrong. Her team, 6 men, 1 woman, approaching a hijacked freighter under moonless skies. They'd trained for every contingency, every one except betrayal. A blast tore through the hull. She remembered the sound, not the explosion, but the silence that followed. She remembered sinking, the world turning from chaos to calm, as her body descended into darkness. The first breath she couldn't take. The scream she never made. The training that told her, don't fight, flow. She had lasted 4 minutes and 48 seconds before breaking the surface beside a burning ship. She was the only one who did. The dream ended the same way it always did, with her eyes snapping open, lungs tight, the taste of salt still there even after all these years. She sat up, heart hammering against the quiet. The city outside glowed indifferent. She reached for her notebook, turned to a blank page and wrote, "Memory is just the body refusing to forget." She stared at the words until they stopped trembling. 3 weeks into her training program, the company's headquarters experienced a real emergency. Not a drill this time. A systems breach, power failure, elevator lockouts, security doors sealed. Someone had triggered a genuine alarm, and no one knew if it was a cyber attack or something worse. Alarms blared, red lights flooded the corridors, panic rippled through the staff like shockwaves. Anya was on the 30th floor when it happened. She could hear the fear in people's voices, the chaos in the comms. She grabbed her earpiece. All teams respond, calm voices only. Static, a few broken replies. The network was jammed. Rick's voice came through faintly. Command center unresponsive, backup power out. Anya's mind shifted into a clarity she hadn't felt in years. Not panic, precision. "Copy that," she said calmly. "Switch to local comms, form units of 3, account for civilians." No hesitation in her tone, no emotion, just focus. On the 47th floor, the same place it had all begun, the lights flickered, then died completely. A dozen employees were trapped inside the reinforced room. Miller and Jones were among them. They called through the locked door, no response. The electronic systems were dead. "Commander," Jones's voice crackled faintly through the emergency channel, "doors jammed. Fire controls down, oxygen dropping." Anya didn't answer right away. She was already moving. The hallway was half-lit, emergency strobes flashing red. Smoke from a burnt fuse filled the air. The elevator was out, so she took the stairs. 38 flights. No hesitation. Every step silent, steady, methodical. By the time she reached the door, her lungs burned, but her mind was ice. She crouched beside the panel, pried open the manual override cover, and studied the wiring. "Jones," she said through the comm, breath barely audible, "I need you to do exactly what I say." "Copy. Check for heat near the vents." "Cool so far." "Good. That means the system failure's mechanical, not thermal." She pulled 2 wires together, created a spark, rerouted the current. The door mechanism twitched. Miller's voice came through. "Ma'am, oxygen." "I know," she said sharply. "You have 90 seconds. Listen to me. When I say hold your breath, you hold it. Understand?" They both answered at once, "Yes, ma'am." She yanked a fuse loose, stripped a wire with her teeth, and twisted it into the secondary control. Sparks hissed, then silence. The panel went dark. She exhaled slowly, then whispered into the comm, "Now." Inside the sealed room, Miller and Jones obeyed without question. Anya cut 2 more wires, reset the circuit manually, and slammed the fuse back in. The lock disengaged with a metallic click. She shoved the door open, smoke rolling past her, light spilling into the corridor. They stumbled out, gasping, eyes wide, alive. Her voice was calm, almost detached. "Breathe." Miller tried to thank her, but she lifted a hand. "Later." They all stood in silence, the red light still pulsing around them, the alarm still echoing. For a moment, the line between training and reality vanished. An hour later, after systems were restored and the threat neutralized, just a power grid surge, not an attack, the team gathered in the debrief room. No one spoke at first. Rick broke the silence. You ran 38 floors." 39, she corrected softly. He exhaled. "You saved them." She looked at him, not proudly, not even humbly, just evenly. "They saved themselves. I just reminded them they could." He smiled faintly. "Still, you didn't panic." She turned her gaze toward the window, where dawn was beginning to color the skyline. "I stopped panicking years ago. Doesn't mean I stopped being afraid." He frowned. "You were afraid." "Always," she said quietly. "Fear isn't weakness, it's data. You read it, not run from it." He nodded slowly. Something in his expression shifted, not hero worship, not intimidation. Understanding. Later, when the building had calmed and the staff went home, Anya remained in the training room, the one where it had all started. The lights were dim. The mats still smelled faintly of rubber and sweat. She sat cross-legged in the center, breathing slow, eyes closed. She could still feel the phantom pressure on her throat from that first day. Still hear the laughter. Still hear the silence that followed. And for the first time, she let herself feel something she'd buried deep. Not pride, not pain. Grief. For every time she'd had to prove she belonged. For every moment she'd been underestimated, dismissed, or mocked. For every breath she'd learned to hold instead of scream. She opened her eyes and they glistened. She whispered maybe to the room, maybe to herself. No one ever asks how long you can hold your breath after they stop choking you. And then she smiled, small, fragile but real. The city lights shimmered against the glass, and her reflection stared back, tired, scarred, still standing. In that reflection, she saw not the ghost of who she'd been, but the quiet, resilient truth of who she'd become. A survivor who no longer needed to hold her breath just to be heard. Sometimes redemption doesn't roar. It exhales. And in that breath, the world finally listens. They said the footage never left the building. But footage always travels. Somewhere between an encrypted company server and an admiral's curiosity, the video of the 47th floor incident made its way through channels no one was supposed to use anymore: old military forums, private inboxes, encrypted group chats labeled only with numbers. No captions, no commentary. Just 2 minutes of grainy surveillance footage. A woman being grabbed by the throat. A room full of men laughing. And then silence, movement, dominance. Followed by an older man's voice. "You confused arrogance with competence." By the time the clip reached Norfolk, it had already been seen by 36 active duty officers, 2 intelligence analysts, and 1 commander from Special Operations Command who hadn't said her name out loud in years. The email arrived on a Friday. A single subject line, RESH. She was at her desk when it came, the training floor quiet, afternoon sunlight pouring through the glass. She almost deleted it. Almost. But curiosity was a dangerous instinct. She opened it. "Commander Sharma, it's been a long time. I've seen the footage, so have others. We could use you again, consultation basis only. A developing situation in the Baltic. Civilian vessel compromise. We need someone who understands both silence and survival. If you're willing, you know where to find us." J. Harker, SOCOM liaison. She read it twice, then deleted it. Or tried to. Her finger hovered over the key, then stopped. She closed her eyes and felt the salt again. The weight of the sea pressing against her ribs. The sound of a dying radio call from years ago. We're hit. She shut the laptop, pushed it away, and stood. No, not again. That evening she left early, walking the long stretch of pier that faced the Hudson. The air was sharp, metallic. The kind of cold that wakes you up. She leaned against the railing, watching the water shimmer under the city's fractured reflection. And that's when she heard footsteps behind her. "Didn't think I'd find you out here," came a familiar voice. She turned. Rick Henson. He was holding 2 cups of coffee, offering one out like a peace treaty. She took it. "You track everyone you work with." "Just the ones who scare me." That earned a small smile. He leaned beside her, elbows on the railing. "You've been quiet lately." "I'm always quiet." "Yeah," he said, "but this time it's the kind of quiet that listens too much." She didn't respond. The wind tugged at her hair. After a while he said, "The team's asking about you. They think you're leaving." "Maybe I should." He turned to her. "Why, you built something here, you made us better." She looked at the water again. "Sometimes, making others better reminds you how much of yourself you left behind to do it." He frowned. "That sounds like guilt." "It's not guilt," she said softly. "It's memory." She sipped the coffee, staring at the horizon, the faint silver line where river met sky. "Every calm I teach comes from a storm I survived, and storms don't leave you clean." Later that night, she returned to her room. The deleted email wasn't in the trash folder. It wasn't anywhere. But when she opened her notebook, she found a small piece of paper tucked inside, the kind only one man could have placed there. A note in Admiral Keltwell's handwriting. "If you're going back into the water, do it by choice, not out of obligation." She stared at the note for a long time, then folded it carefully and placed it back between the pages. But sleep didn't come. Because somewhere, far away, another voice had joined the storm inside her head, one she hadn't heard in a decade. "Breathe, Sharma, hold steady, we're coming back around." Only they never did. 2 days later, she met Keltwell in person for the first time since that day on the training floor. He was older now, slower, but his presence still carried weight. "Admiral," she greeted. "Commander," he said, standing, "you look tired." She smiled faintly. "I've been teaching patience, it's exhausting." He motioned for her to sit. "You got the email." "I deleted it." "I know," he said. "They reached out to me next, thought I could talk you into it." She raised an eyebrow. "And can you?" He shrugged. "Probably not, but I thought you deserved to know why they asked." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, satellite images. A civilian research vessel adrift in the Baltic, its transponder offline, its last distress call, borders unknown origin. Keltwell said quietly, "It's not a rescue mission. It's an investigation. They're saying it's pirates, but the data suggests something else. Whoever hit that ship moved like trained operators." She looked up. "And they want me to assess, that's all. You won't be in the field." She closed the folder. "That's what they said last time." He nodded slowly. "I know." They sat in silence for a moment. Finally, he said, "You spent your whole life teaching people how to stay alive when everything falls apart. Maybe it's time to show yourself how." She smiled without humor. "You always did know how to make it sound noble." He met her gaze. "It's not about nobility, it's about peace. You haven't had any since that night in the water." Her jaw tightened. He leaned back, voice soft. "This might be how you finally get it." That night she stood again at the window of her apartment, watching the rain streak the glass. Her reflection looked foreign. Civilian clothes, hair down, eyes tired. She whispered to herself, "You said you'd never go back." But she knew. She already had. Some part of her had never left the sea. She opened her notebook and wrote, "Healing isn't the absence of pain. It's the courage to face where it began." 3 weeks later, she landed in Copenhagen under a gray, washed-out sky. Officially, she was a security advisor, on loan from a private contractor. Unofficially, she was there to read a ghost. At the port, she met her contact, Commander Jace Harker, U.S. liaison. Broad-shouldered, salt in his beard, eyes like he hadn't slept in days. "Didn't think I'd see you again," he said, extending a hand. She shook it firmly. "Didn't think I'd agree." He smirked. "Guess neither of us learned." They boarded a small cutter heading into the Baltic. The wind bit through her jacket. The smell of salt water brought everything back, years compressed into heartbeats. Jace watched her. "You okay?" She nodded, just remembering. He studied her for a second, then said, "You know, they called you the woman who held her breath." She smiled faintly. People love myths when they don't have to live them. When they reached the site, the water was eerily calm. The derelict vessel floated lifeless, its hull scorched in places, name barely legible, Aurora's Wake. Anya's boots hit the deck first. Metal echoed underfoot. The smell of diesel and salt hung heavy. The team spread out, checking cabins, engine rooms, data drives. But Anya moved differently, not searching for evidence but for rhythm. Every ship has a pulse, she thought. This one's was gone. She walked the length of the main corridor, flashlights sweeping across walls streaked with soot. Her mind cataloged everything: burn patterns, bullet impacts, air currents. Then she stopped. Near the lower deck, faint scratches along the bulkhead. Not random, deliberate. A pattern. She crouched, tracing her fingers along the marks. 3 short lines, 2 long, 1 short. Her breath caught. She knew that code. Navy emergency shorthand. Under duress, trust no one. Her flashlight trembled just slightly. "Jace," she called quietly. He appeared behind her. "What is it?" She stepped aside. "Someone left a message." He frowned, scanning it. "You're sure?" "Yes," she said, "and whoever wrote it was trained." He looked at her. "You think this was one of ours?" She didn't answer, not yet. But deep down, something cold began to settle in her chest, the familiar weight of realization. Maybe this wasn't just a mission. Maybe it was a mirror. That night, as the cutter rocked gently in the waves, she stood alone on deck. The sea stretched out infinite and black. She inhaled deeply, eyes closed. Salt wind, silence. And somewhere beneath it all, ghosts. Her reflection in the water shimmered, distorted, and for a brief, impossible second, it wasn't her face looking back but someone else. A man's voice echoed in her memory. "We're coming back around." She exhaled slowly. This time, she didn't hold her breath. Sometimes, destiny doesn't come knocking. It whispers from the dark water, "You swore you'd never touch again." And when it does, you either dive in or drown standing still. The sea had a way of hiding its truths. It didn't bury them, it just waited. Anya had spent her life learning to read what the water refused to say. And tonight, under a low, bruised sky, it felt like it was whispering again. The Aurora's Wake swayed gently, cables groaning. Floodlights from the cutter painted the hull in flickering bands of white. The crew worked methodically, collecting samples, recording data, photographing every inch. But Anya wasn't with them. She stood alone in the ship's lower corridor, staring at those scratched marks on the wall. 3 short, 2 long, 1 short. A code she hadn't seen since Operation Larkspur. The night she stopped breathing like everyone else. Jace Harker found her crouched near the bulkhead, still studying the message. Been here for hours, he said softly. You see something I do. She didn't look up. It's not just a code, it's a signature. He frowned. A signature. Her voice was steady but quiet. This pattern, it's something my team used, before everything went wrong, a way to mark safe corridors, escape paths. He squatted beside her. You think someone from your team was here? She hesitated, the pause too long, too deliberate. I think someone survived, she said finally. The next morning they swept the ship again, slower this time. Every creak, every sound of shifting metal felt deliberate, alive. In the main control cabin she found a sealed locker, rusted, fused shut. She pried it open with a crowbar, metal shrieking. Inside, a single waterproof case. When she cracked it, the smell of salt and oil escaped. Inside were data drives. Military issue, marked with a faded insignia, one she hadn't seen in years. DVGRU. Her unit. Jace stared. How the hell did this end up here? Anya's hands trembled before she could stop them. Someone brought it, she whispered. Someone who wasn't supposed to. She connected the drive to a portable reader. The screen flickered, distorted. Then text appeared, encrypted logs, operational timestamps, classified field transmissions. Jace leaned closer. Can you read it? Not yet, she murmured, but the file names. She froze. One of them was labeled simply, SHARMA2. Her breath caught. The same way it had under the ocean 10 years ago. Jace saw the look in her eyes. Anya, what is that? She didn't answer, not immediately. Finally she said, before Larkspur our team was split, 2 teams of 4. We were supposed to converge on the same target. My team never made it back. The other. She stopped herself, her voice hardened. There was no other, or so I thought. He leaned back slowly. You think this file? I think someone lived. And the way she said it made Jace realize it wasn't hope in her voice. It was fear. That night back on the cutter, she sat alone with the laptop. Rain tapped against the porthole like static. The encryption took hours to break. At 03:12 the screen finally shifted. A log opened. And the voice that filled her headphones made her freeze. If you're hearing this, then I'm either dead or compromised. This is Lieutenant Mason Reeve, DEVGRU. Operation Larkspur was never what it seemed. We were sent to retrieve data, not rescue hostages. The targets weren't pirates, they were assets. Someone wanted them erased. The voice cracked. She could hear wind, gunfire, chaos in the background. They turned on us mid-operation. We were sold out. Command ordered the blackout. Sharma's team didn't drown, they were written off. The audio stuttered, then resumed. If anyone finds this, tell her. Static. Then silence. Anya sat frozen. Her hand clenched into a fist. The screen reflected her face, pale, expressionless, eyes burning from the inside out. She buried that night as a failure, her failure. The explosion, the chaos, the mission collapse. But now it was betrayal. Not tragedy, treason. And someone in her own command had orchestrated it. Jace found her in the galley an hour later, still staring at the laptop. You haven't slept, he said quietly. No. You want to talk about what's on that drive? No. He pulled up a chair anyway. I listened, he said, the voice Mason Reeve. I thought he was KIA. So did I. Why would he use your name on the file? She looked up, eyes hollow. Because I was the one he was trying to save. Morning came cold and gray. The mission had shifted from analysis to containment. Higher-ups were already scrambling. Orders were coming down from Washington to seal the data, classify the operation, report it as recovered material of no significance. Anya knew that phrase. She used it herself once to bury things too dangerous for truth. Jace slammed a folder on the table. They're shutting it down. They're sending a recovery team. We're out." She didn't react. "Of course they are." He frowned. "That doesn't bother you." She looked up. "It doesn't surprise me." He studied her face, then said softly, "You're not going to let it go, are you?" "No," she said, "because if Reeves survived, someone else gave that order, someone who's still out there." That evening, as they prepared to leave, she walked the length of the Aurora's wake one last time. Her hand trailed along the railing, fingertips brushing the rusted steel. For a moment she imagined voices, her old team laughing, arguing, alive. Then the sound faded. But something in her chest didn't. A pulse. A calling. Not of revenge. Of responsibility. They left the Baltic under heavy rain. The cutter sliced through waves like a blade through silk. Jace watched her from the bridge, standing alone at the bow, face to the storm, hair whipping in the wind. She looked like a ghost chasing the horizon. He approached, shouting over the wind, "What happens when you find him, Reeve, or whoever's behind this?" She didn't turn. "Depends if they're still breathing." He exhaled, half a laugh, half disbelief. "You're serious?" She finally looked at him. Her eyes weren't angry, just resolute. "I spent 10 years thinking my team died because of me. I can live with ghosts. I can't live with lies." He nodded slowly. "Then I'm with you." She smiled faintly. "You shouldn't be." "Maybe not, but someone's got to remind you to breathe." That earned the first genuine laugh from her in days. Back in Copenhagen, she filed her final report, stripped, clinical, nothing that hinted at what she'd found. But before she signed it, she slipped a separate document into her folder, a handwritten note addressed to Admiral Keltwell. "Sir, you once said calm is what discipline sounds like before it acts. Consider this the sound before the storm." She sealed it, walked out. Her steps echoed against the terminal floor, deliberate, silent, steady. She didn't look back. That night she sat by the harbor again, watching the Black Sea roll beneath the moonlight. She pulled out her notebook. On a fresh page she wrote, "The world taught me to be silent. The sea taught me to listen. Now I know what it was trying to say." She closed the notebook and tucked it inside her jacket. Then, as the fog swallowed the coastline, she whispered into the dark, a promise not to the dead, but to herself. "I'm coming for the truth." The wind caught her hair, the sea carried her voice, and somewhere out there, under a different sky, a signal blinked faintly on a satellite screen, an encrypted transmission sent from a long-dormant Navy beacon. It carried one message. SHRMA-2 active. Sometimes strength isn't surviving what tried to kill you. Sometimes it's going back to ask why it had to. And this time, Anya Sharma wasn't just holding her breath. She was diving. The ocean had followed her home. Not in waves, but in weight, that invisible pull in her chest that said you're not done yet. 2 days after Copenhagen, she was back in New York. Different skyline, same silence. The company had already moved on. The team continued their drills, unaware that the woman who'd rebuilt their discipline was now dismantling her own peace. Anya stayed quiet. She smiled when she needed to, nodded when spoken to. But her nights stretched long, lit only by the blue glow of encrypted screens and the low hum of a laptop fan. She'd been tracking the signal, the one that blinked at 02:11 every night since she left the Baltic. SHRMA-2 active. Each time it appeared, the coordinates shifted, a breadcrumb trail across the North Atlantic, then inland. Not random, patterned. A route. Someone wanted to be found. Her first call wasn't to the Navy. It was to a ghost. "Dr. Callan," she said softly when the line connected. A pause, a man's voice answered, older, tired. "You shouldn't be calling me, Commander. I'm not cleared for this." "You never were cleared for half the things you did, and it never stopped you." A dry chuckle. Fair, what do you need? Access to decommissioned DEVGRU field records. Specifically, anything tied to Operation Larkspur or attached units under black budget clearance. He whistled low. You're digging deep. You planning to stay alive while doing it? Trying. He hesitated. You really think someone made it out? She said nothing. The silence was answer enough. After a moment, Callan sighed. All right, I'll see what I can pull, but if I do this, you'll owe me. I already do. 48 hours later, a secure envelope arrived at her door, no sender. Inside, a single flash drive and a handwritten note. Found something. Not sure what you're looking for, but this isn't just about your team. Watch your back. She plugged it in. The screen filled with data, manifests, redacted memos, operational reports. And buried deep within them, a file labeled Blue Widow, COMPRTMENTLIZED, access only. Her pulse quickened. She decrypted it. What she saw wasn't a mission summary, it was a funding ledger. Private contracts, shell companies, payments routed through corporate defense subsidiaries. And at the top of every chain, the same name. Henson Global Security. For a moment, she just stared at the screen. Her breath slowed, her pulse steadied. Rick Henson's company. The same one she'd been hired to train. Coincidence didn't exist in her world. Someone had hired her not to reform that team, but to keep an eye on them. The realization crawled through her like ice. She picked up her phone, hesitated, then called him. He answered on the second ring. Commander. Rick, we need to talk. Everything all right? Not on the phone. They met at a small cafe near Battery Park, the kind of place where no one noticed anyone. He looked older somehow, not physically, just heavier. What's this about? He asked, taking a seat. She slid a printed sheet across the table. Does this name mean anything to you? He looked down. Henson Global Security. His own company. What kind of question is that? He said, confused. This, she said, tapping the page, is where the funding for Larkspur originated, indirectly, through your contractors. He frowned. That's not possible, I wasn't even employed there at the time, she finished. I know, which means whoever signed these authorizations was using your company's network as cover. He leaned back, rubbing his face. Jesus, you're saying my company helped set up your mission. I'm saying someone inside it did. He was silent for a long moment. Then he whispered, why bring this to me? Because I think you're being used, just like we were. That night, after they parted ways, Anya took the subway back to her apartment. Her instincts wouldn't let her rest. Something about the file didn't add up. The metadata was too clean, too recent. Someone wanted her to find it. She stepped off the train, walked the 3 blocks to her building. Rain slicked the pavement, turning the streetlights into blurred halos. She keyed into her apartment, shut the door behind her, and froze. The window was open, and someone had been inside. Her eyes flicked to the desk. Laptop gone, flash drive gone. Only one thing remained. A single folded note. She unfolded it. Stop digging. The dead don't need saving. No signature. She stared at the paper for a long moment, then set it on the counter. No panic, just the old stillness, the one that came before impact. She reached for her bag, checked the pistol inside, loaded. Then the burner phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. No voice, just static. Then a faint whisper. You shouldn't have opened the file, Anya. The voice was male, calm. Measured. Familiar. Mason, she whispered. Silence. Then the line went dead. For the first time in years, she felt something she couldn't control, her heartbeat quickening. Not fear. Recognition. If he was alive, he was being watched. And if he'd reached out, it meant someone else already knew she'd found the truth. She sat down slowly, trying to think. What did Reeves say in his recording? We were sold out. They turned on us. Maybe the sellout was still alive too. The next day, she went back to the office as if nothing had happened. Routine was camouflage. She trained, she briefed, she led. But every second her mind ran in loops, analyzing, cross-referencing, rebuilding the timeline. During a break, she stepped outside onto the terrace, phone in hand, scrolling through satellite feeds she'd managed to recover. A shadow fell beside her. Busy? Henson asked quietly. She didn't look up. Always. He hesitated. Someone broke into my office last night. She turned slowly. What? Didn't take anything, just moved things, like they wanted me to know. Then they know we met, she said flatly. He nodded. What do we do? Her eyes drifted toward the skyline, the cold silver of the Hudson cutting through the city. We stop pretending we're civilians, she said. He swallowed. You think it's that deep? It's deeper. That night she drove north. No destination, just distance. She ended up outside the city, parked near an old warehouse by the docks, one of the old Navy depots converted to private storage. The air smelled of rust and rain. She got out, flashlight in one hand, weapon in the other. Inside, the building was empty, mostly. But halfway down the main corridor, she saw it. A small terminal, powered online. On the screen, SHARMA2, connection pending. Her throat tightened. She approached slowly. The cursor blinked once. Then text appeared. Took you long enough. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She typed back. Reeve. A pause. Not exactly, but he's close. Stop looking for him. They're already watching you through this feed. Her pulse steadied. Then why warn me? Because you were never supposed to survive Larkspur either. And then nothing. The terminal went black. She stood there, the hum of the storm building outside. Somewhere deep within her, the old soldier woke fully. They'd taken her peace, her truth, her past. Now they were trying to take her silence. They were about to learn what that silence was capable of. She returned to the car, rain hammering the windshield, thunder crawling across the bay. She pulled out her notebook, opened to a new page and wrote slowly, deliberately, each letter pressed deep into the paper. They think silence means surrender. They forget who taught me to hold my breath. She tore the page out, folded it, and tucked it into her jacket. Then she started the engine. The headlights cut through the darkness like knives. Ahead, the road back to Manhattan. Behind, everything she used to be. Somewhere in between, the truth waiting to surface. Sometimes, survival isn't about escaping the storm. It's about becoming quiet enough to hear it forming and deciding to walk straight into it. And as Anya Sharma drove into the night, she knew. She wasn't running anymore. She was hunting. New York didn't sleep, it watched. Every window, every flicker of light, every reflection was a lens waiting to see something it wasn't supposed to. Anya Sharma had learned long ago how to move in that kind of world. Head down, eyes quiet, body still. A shadow between the movements of others. That night she wasn't a consultant. She wasn't a SEAL. She was a question, and someone out there was terrified of her finding the answer. The first clue came from the storm itself. At 01:13, her burner phone lit up again. Unknown number. No voice, just coordinates. Washington, D.C. An address she knew too well. Office of Naval Intelligence, Archives Division. She exhaled, long and even. If whoever sent that wanted her dead, they'd chosen the right place to try. Still, she packed light. No insignia, no traces, just a small handgun, 2 encrypted drives, and the notebook she'd been writing in since the beginning. Before she left, she opened to the last page and wrote, "If I don't come back, tell the sea I kept my word." Then she closed it. She reached D.C. by dawn. Rain-slick streets, iron fences, marble washed pale by fog. The archives building stood like a monument to silence, faceless, windowless, eternal. The kind of place where truth was filed away until it stopped being dangerous. Her clearance code from years ago shouldn't have worked. But it did. Someone inside wanted her in. The guards waved her through without question. Down the hall, past the security checkpoints, through the frosted doors marked Level 3, declassified pending review. The room smelled of paper, dust, and recycled air. And in the far corner, waiting, was Admiral James Keltwell. He looked older than she remembered. His uniform immaculate, his eyes tired. "Commander Sharma," he said softly, "you shouldn't have come." "Then why make it so easy?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he motioned for her to sit. On the table between them, a single classified file. Stamped Larkspur Blue Widow, TRMNATED. She stared at it. "You knew." "I suspected." "Suspected," she repeated, voice flat. "You watched me blame myself for years and you suspected." He met her eyes, guilt written in the lines around them. "It wasn't that simple," he said quietly. "There were orders, layers above me. I couldn't." "You couldn't what? Disobey? Tell the truth." He sighed. "You think this was just about you. It was. That mission wasn't sabotage, Anya, it was containment." She blinked. Containment of what? He pushed the file toward her. "Read." The pages inside weren't reports. They were autopsies. 12 names she didn't recognize. Civilians. Captured during a supposed anti-piracy operation. All dead before extraction. All carrying experimental biotech implants. Tracking devices linked to a covert intelligence project called Blue Widow. A program designed to test neural resilience in high-stress combat environments. Human subjects. Unauthorized. And at the bottom of the file, signatures. Authorization, Mason Reeve. Oversight, Admiral James Keltwell. Her hands went cold. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You signed it." He closed his eyes. "We thought it was a data-gathering mission. They didn't tell us what the implants really were until after the explosion." She shook her head slowly, and when the truth came out, "They erased it," he said. "They erased you." The silence stretched between them like a wound that wouldn't close. Finally she said, "Reeves alive." He nodded once. "I know." "You've seen him." "He reached out 6 months ago. Same signal you traced. He wanted me to warn you off." "Warn me?" Keltwell's eyes met hers, heavy with something between sorrow and resignation. "Because he's not the man you remember." Her breath steadied, but her voice dropped an octave. "Where is he?" He hesitated, then slid a second envelope across the table. "Coordinates, he's been off the grid. Black site, Eastern Europe. No official record if you go after him." "I'm not going after him." She stood, pocketing the envelope. "I'm going after the truth." "Anya," he said, standing too. "They'll come for you, you know that." She turned toward the door. "I hope they do." She didn't sleep for the next 20 hours. Just movement. Planning. The cold rhythm of survival that felt too familiar. She flew out of Dulles under a false identity, landed in Warsaw, drove south into the Carpathians, following the coordinates Keltwell had given her. It led her to an abandoned military facility, carved into the side of a mountain. The sign outside was faded. The air reeked of oil and mold. Inside, her flashlight cut through the dark like a blade, revealing empty corridors, shattered glass, rusted machinery. But in one corner room, A single monitor still hummed. When she touched the keyboard, the screen flickered on showing live security feeds. And there he was. Mason Reeve. Older. Scarred. Alive. He was sitting in a chair, cuffed, talking quietly to someone off camera. His voice was calm, too calm. Her pulse spiked. The date stamp on the feed read live. She turned, scanning for any sign of movement. None. Then she saw the camera's reflection in the glass, small, red light blinking. And for a brief, chilling moment, she realized it was staring not at Mason, but at her. The door slammed behind her. A voice echoed through the intercom, low, measured, familiar. "You should have stayed buried, Anya." She froze. "You think you're the only ghost left. You think I didn't try to fix it." Her voice was steady. "Reeve." He laughed softly. "Not quite. Mason's dead. What's left is something they built to make sense of his death." Her eyes scanned the room, the computers, the blinking red lights. "AI replication," she said quietly. "They modeled you. They modeled us. Every decision, every breath, every hesitation. They wanted to study resilience. You were their control subject." Her jaw tightened. "You're lying." "Am I?" The voice softened. "Why do you think you were the only one who could hold your breath that long, Anya? Why do you think you survived when no one else did?" Her chest tightened. "Stop. They changed you too. Blue Widow wasn't just implants. It was behavioral mapping, psychological conditioning. You weren't trained to survive the impossible, you were programmed to." She gripped the table, breath slowing, pulse steadying. "They wanted silence that obeyed," the voice said, "and they got it." She closed her eyes, forcing her heartbeat to calm. She wouldn't give the voice the satisfaction of control. "Still holding your breath," it whispered. She drew in a slow inhale and exhaled. "No," she said softly, "I'm breathing on my own." Then she pulled the plug. The screens went black. Outside, rain hammered against the concrete walls. She stood there, the storm echoing inside her chest. If any part of what that machine said was true, then Blue Widow hadn't ended with her team. It had ended inside her. She was both the experiment and the evidence. Hours later, she reached a safe house on the outskirts of Krakow. Rick was there waiting. He followed her trail halfway across the world. "You look like hell," he said softly. "Feel like it," she replied. He handed her a small metal drive. "You'll want to see this. Pulled it from one of our systems before I left. You were right, someone's been rerouting company funds into off-book research." She slotted it into her laptop. The file name scrolled by Blue Widow, Project Replicate/SHARMA2 Test Data. Her stomach turned. "Test data?" Rick asked. "What does that mean?" "It means they've been watching me," she said quietly. "Every training session, every breath I've taken. They weren't studying the team, they were studying me." He looked at her, horrified. "And Henson Global was the lab." She sat back, eyes burning with exhaustion. 10 years of guilt. 10 years of trying to make peace. And now she knew she'd never been free. The silence she'd mastered wasn't peace. It was programming. She closed her eyes and whispered, "So this is what survival costs." Rick leaned forward. "What are you going to do?" She opened her eyes. They were steady now, cold, focused. "End it." He swallowed. "How?" She looked at the drive, the data, the endless layers of deception. "By showing the world what they built." That night she sent one final encrypted message. Recipient unknown. Subject Protocol 0. Attached every file, every log, every secret. Blue Widow. Larkspur. All of it. And then, as she hit send, she whispered the words that had lived in her since the ocean. "Sometimes silence isn't consent. It's the breath you take before you speak." The progress bar reached 100%. Transmission complete. But somewhere out there in a hidden server, a single light blinked. SHRMA2 active. The machine wasn't done. And neither was she. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It just gives you something worth fighting for. And as the dawn broke over a foreign city, Anya Sharma loaded her weapon, pocketed her notebook, and whispered to herself. One last breath. Then she stepped out into the light, calm, silent, and ready. The truth always looks smaller once you've caught it. For years it had been this impossible thing, a shadow at the edge of her memory, an ache that kept her moving. But now, sitting in a safe house, as the morning sun bled across the cracked concrete walls, Anya Sharma was staring at it on a single, humming screen. Blue Widow. All of it. Names. Dates. Trials. Victims. She had the entire project in front of her, from its birth to its betrayal. And at the very top of the chain of signatures, above all the false ones, all the masks, one name remained unredacted. Admiral James Keltwell. For a long moment she couldn't breathe. The irony was too cruel. He had guided her, saved her career, helped her rebuild after the water, after the ghosts, after herself. And he was the architect all along. Her first instinct wasn't anger. It was sorrow, deep, bone-heavy sorrow, that came from losing something more permanent than trust. She looked at the notebook beside her, its pages swollen with rain and words she hadn't let herself say. She wrote one final line. Even the calmest waters can hide a storm. Then she stood. By midday, she was on a plane bound for Washington. No disguise this time. No aliases. She wasn't hiding anymore. When she landed, she didn't go to the base or the archive. She went to him, to the quiet brick townhouse where he lived when the Navy let him feel retired. The street was lined with trees. Peaceful. Ordinary. She knocked once. When the door opened, Keltwell froze. For a moment he looked exactly like she remembered, steady, proud, unshakable. But the pride faded when he saw her eyes. "Anya," he said softly, "I was going to call you." "You should have deleted me instead," she replied. He stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, everything was neat. Pictures of service. Awards. Books aligned with military precision. The kind of order that hides chaos underneath. He poured coffee for both of them. Neither touched it. She placed the flash drive on the table. "You knew this would come back," she said quietly. He didn't deny it. He just stared at the drive like it was something holy and cursed it all at once. Finally, he said, "When they offered Blue Widow, it sounded like salvation, an edge for our operatives, a way to train the mind past fear. You were the proof it could work." "I was the test," she said flatly. He met her gaze. "You were the only one strong enough to survive it." She exhaled slowly. "You tell yourself that so you can sleep." He didn't answer. For a while neither spoke. Then he said, "You sent the files out. I know. The agency's already in chaos." "I didn't do it for chaos," she said. "I did it for the dead." He nodded. "And what now? You think they'll thank you? They'll bury this deeper than before. Truth doesn't live long in sunlight." "Maybe," she said, "but it'll leave a scar." He leaned forward, voice low. "You think you're the only one with scars. I lost everything because of that program. Command, reputation, family." "You lost them because you chose wrong," she said softly. "We all did. I just chose to stop pretending it was noble." Her tone wasn't sharp. It was almost kind, the kind of kindness that comes when you stop hiding the wound. He looked at her for a long time, then said almost gently, "You're not here to arrest me, are you?" "No. To kill me." She shook her head. "You're already dying, you just haven't admitted it yet." He smiled faintly, sad and small. You still talk like a soldier. I'm not one anymore. Yes, he said quietly. You are. You just learned the only real rule there is. She waited. He met her eyes. The mission always changes, but the silence stays the same. She studied him for a moment, then stood. You're wrong, she said softly. Silence only wins if no one breaks it. Then she turned to leave. Outside, the afternoon light was harsh, gold and clean. It caught the faint scar along her throat, the one no one noticed until they looked too long. She walked 3 blocks before she stopped and took out her phone. There was one new message waiting. No sender. Just a location pin and a single line of text. You really did it, we're free. Her hands trembled slightly. She didn't know if it was Mason. She didn't know if it mattered. Because in that moment, for the first time in years, she realized something simple and terrifying. She had nothing left to fight. And yet, for the first time, she felt at peace. Weeks passed. The news barely covered it. A leak, a scandal, a quiet reassignment. The kind of story that fades faster than it deserves to. But in quiet corners of the military, in private security firms, and in whispered conversations between old soldiers, her name resurfaced. Not as a hero, not as a myth, as a reminder. The woman who held her breath. The one who proved that silence could be louder than any war cry. She moved north somewhere along the coast of Maine. A small cottage. Wood floors, salt air. Each morning she rose before dawn, walked to the edge of the cliffs, and watched the ocean shift from black to blue. She still carried her notebook, pages filled with lessons, scars, and names. But now she wrote less about survival and more about what comes after it. Some days she missed the noise, the radio chatter, the drills, the chaos. But most days she was grateful for the quiet. The sea no longer sounded like memory. It sounded like peace. One evening, as the sun burned low over the horizon, she saw a boat out on the water, small, solitary, a dark shape against the dying light. She watched it for a long time. Then she smiled. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was no one. Either way, it didn't matter. Because whatever was left of her past, it had already drifted too far to reach, and she didn't need to chase it anymore. That night, she opened her notebook for the last time. On the final page, under all the scars and ink and years, she wrote, "They grabbed her by the throat once. Now she breathes for herself. Sometimes dignity doesn't shout, it just holds its breath and waits for the world to listen." She closed the book, set it beside the window, and looked out at the dark water stretching to infinity. And then finally, quietly, she exhaled. Because true strength, she'd learned, wasn't about surviving what breaks you. It was about teaching your silence to speak louder than the hands that try to stop it. And that night, somewhere between the hush of the sea and the sigh of the wind, Anya Sharma, the woman who once held her breath for 90 seconds to prove a point, finally let it go. Not in defeat, not in rage, but in peace. Sometimes strength doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers. And sometimes it simply breathes.